Ancient human warbeasts, long dormant, stir to life, their eyes glowing an eerie red as sinister growls rumble forth. Zephyr, the Kobali xenoarchaeologist, gasps and stumbles back, shocked to her core. For months, Zephyr and her team of scientists had been excavating the remote, long-abandoned planet, hoping to uncover relics of humanity's early expansion into the galaxy. Deep beneath the planet's barren surface, they discovered an ancient subterranean military base, its corridors dark and lifeless. In the heart of the base lay a massive chamber, its reinforced walls lined with rows of towering war machines, each resembling a giant armored dog or wolf. Johnny Tucker, a grizzled human mercenary hired by the Kobali government for his expertise in ancient human tech, steps forward to examine the machines. His eyes widen with recognition. "Mechs," he whispers, a mix of awe and unease in his voice. Mechanized exo-combat hounds, experimental weapons deemed too dangerous and unpredictable for widespread use. Designed to be fiercely loyal to their human handlers and utterly ruthless in combat, mechs could tear through enemy lines with terrifying speed and savagery. Zephyr's fascination mingles with horror as she considers the implications. These relics testify to humanity's brilliance and its capacity for violence in equal measure. Johnny feels a strange kinship with the mechs, remembering tales his grandfather told of the legendary metal hounds that fought alongside human soldiers in the Great Galactic War. But as the mechs begin to power up, their purpose long buried, an unsettling realization dawns. If these ancient war beasts, more advanced than any modern weapon, were to fall into the wrong hands, the consequences for the galaxy could be catastrophic. Zephyr and Johnny must decide: destroy the mechs or risk unleashing a force that could reshape the balance of power forever. The fate of countless worlds hangs in the balance, as the secrets of humanity's past threaten to become the galaxy's greatest nightmare. Zephyr's team swarmed over the ancient war machines, scanning every inch of their intricate armor and inner workings. The sensors revealed incredible advancements, self-repairing nano-composite armor that could adapt and morph to handle different environments and weapons. The mech's AI cores were beyond anything the Kobali had ever seen, with the capacity for true learning and growth. Johnny circled the hulking metal beasts, eyes narrowed. He had to find a way to communicate with these things, to understand their protocols. Drawing on faded memories of his grandfather's war stories, he barked out a series of commands in an archaic human military language. To everyone's shock, one of the mechs stirred to life, its eyes flaring crimson. It rose to its feet, towering over Johnny. He stood his ground as the machine lowered its massive head to regard him. A deep rumbling filled the air, and Johnny realized with a start that the mech was scanning him, analyzing his biometrics. Genetic match confirmed. Handler imprint complete. Designation Alpha 1, the mech intoned, its voice a blend of mechanical precision and an almost living growl. Zephyr rushed forward, her face a mix of excitement and fear. "Johnny, be careful. We have no idea what that thing is capable of. It could be dangerous." Johnny shook his head, placing a hand on Alpha 1's flank. The living metal was warm to the touch. These mechs were designed to bond with human handlers. If we can understand how they work, how they think, it could be the key to protecting the Kobali from outside threats. Zephyr bit her lip, considering. The Zorax Empire had been testing the Kobali's borders for months, their ships growing bolder with each incursion. The Kobali needed an edge. "Fine, but I want constant updates, and at the first sign of trouble, we pull the plug. Understood?" Johnny nodded, turning back to Alpha 1. As he ran through a series of diagnostics, a grin spread across his face. "Zeph, you're not going to believe this. This big guy's got sensors that can punch through cloaking, see through jamming. We could spot a Zorax fleet from halfway across the sector." Zephyr's eyes widened. This changed everything. If they could reverse engineer this technology, adapt it, the Kobali might finally have a chance against the Zorax. She took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "Okay, Johnny. You keep working with Alpha 1, but I'm going to be watching very closely. We're playing with fire here, and I don't want us to get burned." As Johnny dug deeper into Alpha One's systems, he stumbled upon an incredible discovery. The mech could link up with the other dormant war machines, interfacing with their AI cores and bringing them under its control. Johnny's pulse raced as he realized the implications. If they could activate the rest of the mechs, they'd have a force capable of defending the Kobali against any threat. Johnny rushed to find Zephyr, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He found her hunched over a workbench, dissecting a piece of mech armor. "Zeph, you're not going to believe this. Alpha 1 can control the other mechs. If we can get them up and running, we might have a shot at stopping the Zorax." Zephyr's eyes widened, her face a mix of hope and trepidation. "Johnny, are you sure about this? We're talking about activating an army of ancient war machines. The risks—" Zephyr bit her lip, considering. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, let's do it, but we're going to need help." Over the next few weeks, Johnny and Zephyr worked tirelessly to bring the mechs back to life. Johnny trained a hand-picked team of Kobali soldiers, teaching them how to handle the massive machines. They called themselves the Wolf Pack, a nod to the mech's canine-like design. Meanwhile, Zephyr reverse-engineered the mech's advanced sensor technology, integrating it into the Kobali defense network. For the first time in years, they had a clear picture of their borders, every ship and station accounted for. Just as the Wolf Pack was preparing for their first deployment, the alarm sounded. Zephyr rushed to the command center, her heart pounding. The screens showed a massive Zorax fleet, their ships shimmering into view as they dropped their cloaks. "How did they get so close without us detecting them?" Zephyr demanded, her voice tight with fear. Johnny's jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter now, we've got to stop them before they reach the colony." He turned to the Wolf Pack, his eyes blazing with determination. "Mount up, we're going hunting." The Meeks surged forward, their metal paws pounding against the deck as they raced towards the hangar. Johnny climbed into Alpha One's cockpit, the neural link snapping into place. He could feel the Meeks' anticipation, its eagerness for battle. As the Wolf Pack launched into space, Johnny's mind merged with Alpha One's, their thoughts and instincts becoming one. The Zorax ships loomed ahead, their hulls bristling with weapons. Johnny bared his teeth in a feral grin. Alpha 1 marked targets. Engage cloaking countermeasures. The mech growled in response, its sensors piercing the Zorax ship's cloaks like a knife through butter. The Wolfpack split formation, each mech locking onto a target. The battle was joined in a storm of fire and fury. The Zorax ships were technologically superior, their weapons cutting through space with deadly precision. But the mechs were faster, more agile, their self-repairing armor absorbing the worst of the damage. Johnny and Alpha 1 moved as one, weaving through the Zorax formation with preternatural grace. They targeted the enemy ship's weak points, ripping through hulls and spilling atmosphere into the void. The Wolfpack fought with savage efficiency, their mechs tearing into the Zorax fleet like a pack of hungry predators. The Zorax fought back desperately, but they were outmatched by the ancient war machines and their human-bonded handlers. As the last Zorax ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, Johnny let out a triumphant howl. Alpha 1 echoed the cry, its voice a thunderous roar that shook the stars themselves. Amidst the chaos of the battle, Johnny and Alpha 1 found themselves cut off from the rest of the Wolfpack. A Zorax command ship loomed before them, its hull bristling with weapons. Johnny gritted his teeth. "We have to take out that ship, Alpha. It's our only chance to buy the others some time." Alpha 1 growled in agreement, its sensors already scanning the enemy vessel for weak points. Analyzing structural integrity. Boarding options identified. Proceed with caution, Handler Johnny. Johnny nodded, his grip tightening on the controls. "Let's do this, Alpha. We're going in." The mech surged forward, its claws tearing into the command ship's hull as it forced its way inside. Alarms blared and Zorax soldiers swarmed the breach, their weapons spitting plasma at the intruders. Johnny and Alpha 1 moved as one, the mech's armor deflecting the worst of the fire, while Johnny picked off targets with his pulse rifle. They fought their way through the ship's corridors, leaving a trail of broken bodies and sparking wreckage in their wake. Zorax soldiers threw themselves at the mech, trying to overwhelm it with sheer numbers, but Alpha One was too fast, too powerful. It tore through them like a hot knife through butter, its jaws snapping and its claws rending. At last, they reached the bridge. The doors hissed open, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. Zorax officers barked orders, and technicians scrambled over their consoles, trying desperately to keep the ship together. In the center of it all stood the Zorax commander, his face a mask of rage and fear. "You!" he snarled, recognizing Johnny from the intel reports. "The human who thinks he can control the mechs. You have no idea what you've stumbled into." Johnny leaped from Alpha One's cockpit, his rifle leveled at the commander's head. "Enlighten me, then. What's this really about? Why attack the Kobali?" The commander laughed, a harsh grating sound. "The Kobali? They're nothing. A means to an end. This," he gestured to the tactical display, "this is about the future of the Zorax Empire. And you've just handed us the key." Johnny's eyes widened as he saw the readouts. Biological signatures, DNA sequences, protein structures. The Zorax had been experimenting with a new kind of bioweapon, one that could target specific species, even specific individuals. And they'd used the Kobali as their test subjects. "You monster," Johnny growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "How could you do this? How many have you killed?" The commander shrugged, a smirk playing across his lips. "Sacrifices must be made for the greater good. The Kobali were just the beginning. With this weapon, the Zorax will be unstoppable. We will cleanse the galaxy of all who oppose us, starting with the Kobali homeworld." Johnny's blood ran cold. The Kobali homeworld, Zephyr. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This attack had been a diversion, a way to draw the wolf pack away from their true target. He didn't hesitate. 2 shots center mass. The commander crumpled, his smirk frozen on his face. Johnny leaped back into Alpha One's cockpit, his mind racing. "Alpha, download everything you can from their systems. Bioweapon data, fleet movements, everything. We have to warn the Kobali." Alpha One interfaced with the Zorax computers, its AI sifting through terabytes of data in seconds. Data acquired, bioweapon specifications isolated, sabotaging command ship systems. The bridge exploded into a shower of sparks and flames as Alpha One tore into the ship's power core. Johnny held on tight as the mech leaped back out into space, the command ship breaking apart behind them. They raced back to their own ship, Johnny's heart pounding in his ears. He tried to raise Zephyr on the comms, but there was nothing but static. The Zorax must have been jamming their communications. "Set course for the Kobali homeworld, Alpha," Johnny ordered, his voice tight with fear and anger. "Maximum burn. We have to get there before the Zorax." Alpha One complied, the ship's engines roaring to life. They shot through space, the stars blurring into streaks of light. Johnny stared out at the void, his mind whirling with possibilities. The bioweapon data, if they could analyze it, reverse engineer it. Maybe they could find a way to stop the Zorax. Maybe they could save the Kobali. As the Kobali homeworld grew larger in their view screen, Johnny's heart sank. The Zorax fleet was already in orbit, their ships arrayed in a deadly formation. They were preparing to launch their attack, to unleash their bioweapon on the unsuspecting Kobali below. Johnny's mind raced, desperately seeking a solution. They had the bioweapon data, but no time to analyze it, no time to create a countermeasure. Or did they? An idea formed, a desperate, reckless gambit. "Alpha," Johnny said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "Can you interface with the Zorax bioweapon, hack into its systems, use the data we stole to create a feedback loop?" Alpha One was silent for a moment, its processors whirring. "Affirmative, Handler Johnny, but the risk of contamination is high. If the bioweapon is released during the process..." "We don't have a choice, Alpha. It's the only way to save the Kobali." Johnny took a deep breath, his hands flying over the ship's controls. "We're going in. Get ready to interface on my mark." The ship plunged towards the Zorax fleet, alarms blaring as they were instantly targeted by a hail of weapons fire. Johnny wove through the barrage, His teeth gritted in concentration. They had to get close, had to give Alpha 1 a clear shot at the bioweapon. Plasma scorched their hull, shields straining to the breaking point. Johnny ignored it all, his focus narrowed to a single point. The bioweapon, a pulsing, malevolent mass at the heart of the Zorax formation. For a moment nothing happened. Then the bioweapon began to glow, its surface rippling and distorting. Johnny held his breath, not daring to hope. And then, with a blinding flash, the bioweapon detonated. A wave of energy burst forth, washing over the Zorax fleet like a tsunami. Ships shuddered and went dark, their systems overloaded by the feedback loop Alpha 1 had created. Johnny let out a shout of triumph, even as warning lights flashed across his console. Their ship had been caught in the edge of the blast, their engines and life support failing. Johnny and Alpha 1 plummeted through the atmosphere, the mech's armor glowing red-hot as they punched through the clouds. The Kobali homeworld spread out beneath them, its lush forests and gleaming cities a stark contrast to the destruction raining down from above. They hit the ground hard, Alpha 1's legs absorbing the impact with a hydraulic hiss. Johnny leaped from the cockpit, his heart pounding as he raced towards Zephyr's lab. The doors slid open with a whoosh, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. Zephyr hunched over a console, her fingers flying across the keys. She looked up as Johnny approached, her eyes widening. "Johnny, thank the stars you're alive. The Zorax." "I know," Johnny cut her off, his voice tight. "We stole the bioweapon data from their command ship, but we don't have much time. They're coming." Zephyr nodded, her expression hardening. "Then let's get to work." They pored over the data, their minds racing as they tried to unravel the secrets of the Zorax's deadly creation. Johnny felt a growing sense of desperation, a need to stop this weapon before it could claim any more lives. As they worked, Johnny found himself opening up to Zephyr in a way he never had before. "The Zorax," he said, his voice low and rough. "They killed my family. A raid on our colony years ago. I've been hunting them ever since." Zephyr paused, her eyes meeting his. "I understand," she said softly. "The Zorax took my mate, my clutch siblings. That's why I've dedicated my life to this, to finding a way to stop them." Johnny nodded, a new-found respect for the Kobali scientist blooming in his chest. They worked in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared loss hanging heavy in the air. And then a breakthrough. Zephyr let out a triumphant shout, her eyes shining. "I've got it! The countermeasure, it's—" A deafening boom shook the lab, the walls trembling as the Zorax fleet opened fire on the planet below. Johnny and Zephyr shared a look of grim determination. "Upload it to the defense network," Johnny ordered, already moving towards the door. "I'll buy you some time." He sprinted back to Alpha 1, the mech crouching low as he approached. "Ready for one more fight, buddy?" Alpha 1 growled in response, its eyes flashing. Together they launched into the sky, streaking towards the Zorax fleet. The rest of the wolf pack fell into formation behind them, their mechs gleaming in the sunlight. The battle was joined in a storm of fire and blood. The Zorax ships, their bioweapons neutralized by Zephyr's countermeasure, fought with the desperation of cornered beasts. But the Kobali defense forces, bolstered by the wolf pack and their mechs, pushed them back, inch by hard-fought inch. Johnny and Alpha 1 were in the thick of it, their minds merged as they tore through the Zorax lines. They fought with a savage grace, a perfect union of man and machine. But the Zorax commander, his ship burning and broken, refused to surrender. With a howl of rage, he turned his vessel towards the Kobali capital, his intent clear. A kamikaze run, a final, spiteful act of destruction. Johnny saw it happening, saw the commander's ship hurtling towards the city. He knew with a cold certainty that he had to stop it, no matter the cost. "Alpha," he said, his voice calm and clear over the calm. "We have to take him out. You with me?" Alpha 1 roared in response, its engines flaring as it shot forward. They intercepted the commander's ship above the city streets, the two vessels locked in a deadly embrace. Plasma fire scorched the air as they dueled. Johnny and Alpha One weaving and dodging with preternatural skill. The commander fought like a man possessed, his eyes wild with hate and fury. They danced a lethal waltz through the skyscrapers, the city below them blurring into a maze of light and shadow. Johnny gritted his teeth, his focus narrowed to a single burning point. He had to end this. He had to... Johnny and Alpha One slammed into the crumpled wreckage of the Zorax commander's ship, the impact sending shockwaves through their shared neural link. Smoke billowed from the twisted metal, mingling with the screams of the wounded and dying. "Alpha, scan for life signs," Johnny barked, already moving to tear away a jagged piece of hull plating. "We've got to get these people out of here." Alpha One's sensors pulsed, cutting through the chaos like a beacon. 23 life signs detected, Handler Johnny. 7 critical. Marking locations now. Johnny nodded, his jaw set as he plunged into the wreckage. He could feel Alpha One's presence in his mind, guiding him to the survivors. They worked as one, the mech's immense strength and advanced sensors, the perfect complement to Johnny's quick thinking and unflinching bravery. One by one they pulled the survivors from the rubble. A young Kobali child, her scales grey with dust and blood. An elderly male, his leg crushed beneath a steel beam. Johnny carried them to safety, his arms aching and his lungs burning with the acrid smoke. All the while, Alpha One stood guard, its massive frame shielding the rescuers from falling debris. When a secondary explosion rocked the crash site, threatening to collapse the fragile pocket where Johnny was working to free a trapped Kobali, the mech lunged forward, catching the falling metal and holding it aloft with a growl of straining hydraulics. "I've got you," Johnny murmured to the terrified Kobali female as he carried her out from beneath Alpha One's sheltering bulk. "You're going to be okay." As the last survivor was pulled from the wreckage, Johnny sagged against Alpha One's flank, his strength spent. The Amech rumbled softly, a sound that echoed through their bond like a wordless gesture of comfort and pride. Around them, Kobali rescue workers and civilians stared in awe, their eyes wide as they took in the sight of the human and his mech, battered and filthy, but unbroken. A cheer went up from the crowd, tentative at first, then growing in strength and volume. "The human saved us," a Kobali child whispered, her eyes shining with wonder. "He and his metal wolf, they saved us all." In the days that followed, as the Kobali began to rebuild their shattered capital, Johnny and Zephyr found themselves at the center of a storm of gratitude and adulation. The wolf pack, once a source of fear and suspicion, were now hailed as heroes, their mechs a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. But even as they basked in the glow of victory, Johnny couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He pored over the data they'd stolen from the Zorax, his brow furrowed as he tried to make sense of the complex web of intrigue and deceit. Late one night, as he hunched over a console in Zephyr's lab, a pattern began to emerge. Supply manifests, encrypted communications, a trail of breadcrumbs leading not to the Zorax, but to someone much closer to home. "Zeph," Johnny called, his voice tight with tension. "You need to see this." Zephyr leaned over his shoulder, her eyes widening as she took in the evidence of Zion's treachery. The rogue general had been working with the Zorax for years, trading Kobali secrets and sabotaging their defenses in exchange for power and wealth. "We have to tell the council," Zephyr breathed, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "We have to stop him before—" The lab doors slammed open, the sound of boots on metal ringing through the space. Johnny and Zephyr spun, reaching for weapons they didn't have, as a squad of Kobali soldiers marched in, their faces hard and their eyes cold. "Well, well," he drawled, his gaze flicking from Johnny to Zephyr and back again. "What do we have here, the great heroes of the Kobali, caught in the act of treason?" Johnny stepped forward, his fists clenched. "The only traitor here is you, Zion. We know what you've done. We know about your deal with the Zorax." Zion laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "You know nothing, human. You think you and your pet machines can stand against the might of the Kobali? Against the future we have planned?" He gestured to his soldiers, his eyes glinting with malice. Seize them and get me those mechs. With them under my control, nothing will stand in our way. Johnny and Zephyr exchanged a glance, a wordless moment of communication and resolve. They had faced the Zorax and won. They had fought and bled and sacrificed for the sake of the Kobali people. They would not surrender now. Not to Zion, not to anyone. As the soldiers closed in, Johnny reached out through the neural link, his mind brushing against Alpha 1's. The mech was waiting, hidden in the shadows of the lab's hangar bay, ready for his signal. The wall exploded inward in a shower of metal and sparks. Alpha 1 bursting through with a roar of fury. The mech charged into the fray, its claws and teeth flashing as it tore into the stunned Kobali soldiers. Johnny and Zephyr dove for cover, snatching up fallen weapons and opening fire on Zion's troops. The lab descended into chaos, the air thick with the stench of blood and ozone. In the chaos of Zion's betrayal, Johnny and Zephyr barely escaped with their lives. With a handful of loyal Kobali soldiers and the remnants of the wolf pack, they fled to the remote edges of the galaxy, seeking refuge in the ruins of an ancient human colony. The abandoned outpost, its once gleaming structures now crumbling and overgrown, provided the perfect cover for their makeshift base. Johnny and Zephyr worked tirelessly, scavenging for supplies and modifying the mechs with whatever technology they could salvage. "We can't keep running forever," Johnny said, his voice heavy with exhaustion as he hunched over a workbench, soldering a frayed wire in Alpha 1's neural interface. "Zion's forces are growing stronger every day. We need a plan." Zephyr nodded, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of their stolen intel. He's been experimenting with Zorax bioweapons, integrating them into the mech's systems. If he succeeds, he'll have an army of weaponized AI at his command. Johnny's jaw tightened. Then we beat him at his own game. We use the bioweapon data to create a new kind of interface, one that will let us merge with the mechs completely. "Is worth it," Johnny cut her off, his gaze fierce. "It's the only way we stand a chance against Zion." For weeks they worked in secret, modifying the neural interfaces and testing the new systems. The process was grueling, the hours long, and the failures many. Not everyone survived the transition, but those who did emerged changed. Their minds and bodies fused with the mechs in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Johnny and Alpha 1 were the first to complete the merge. As Johnny's consciousness melded with the mech's AI, he gasped, overwhelmed by the sudden rush of sensory input. He could feel the thrum of Alpha 1's reactor core, the coiled power in its hydraulic limbs. The mech's senses became his own, the world around him suddenly alive with a dizzying array of data. "Johnny!" Zephyr's voice seemed distant, muffled. "Are you all right?" As the rest of the wolf pack underwent the merge, Johnny and Zephyr began planning their attack on Zion's stronghold. They knew they would only have one chance to strike, one opportunity to end the rogue general's reign of terror before it was too late. But even as they prepared for battle, Johnny couldn't shake the nagging sense of unease that gnawed at him. He looked down at his hands, half expecting to see metal and circuitry instead of flesh and bone. The line between man and machine had blurred, and he wasn't sure where he fit anymore. "You're still you, Johnny," Zephyr said softly, laying a hand on his shoulder. "No matter what happens, no matter what we become, that will never change." Johnny nodded, drawing strength from her words and the loyalty of his fellow Wolfpack members. They were in this together, human and Kobali, organic and synthetic. They would forge a new future, one where the bonds of friendship and the power of unity could overcome any obstacle. As the final modifications were made, and the Meechers thrummed with newfound power, Johnny climbed into Alpha 1's cockpit, the neural link snapping into place with a satisfying click. He could feel the Meechers' anticipation, its eagerness for the fight to come. "All right, Wolfpack," he said, his voice ringing through the comlink. "Let's go hunting." The hangar doors slid open, revealing the star-strewn expanse of space beyond. The Meechers launched into the void, their engines flaring bright against the darkness. They had a mission, a purpose, and nothing would stand in their way. Not Zion, not the Zorax, not the very fabric of reality itself. They were the wolf pack, and they would fight to the bitter end. With their newly merged forms and upgraded mechs, Johnny, Zephyr, and the wolf pack embarked on a campaign of guerrilla strikes against Zion's forces. They hit weapons depots, supply lines, and research facilities with surgical precision, leaving chaos in their wake. As they raided a particularly heavily guarded factory, they discovered the horrifying truth behind Zion's plans. In the depths of the facility, they found dozens of Kobali civilians, their bodies twisted and mutated by Zorak's bioweapons. Some had been fused with mechanical parts, transformed into grotesque cyborg abominations. Johnny's rage boiled over as he saw the suffering etched on the faces of the captives. "Zion's gone too far this time," he growled, his voice resonating through Alpha One's speakers. "We're shutting this place down, and we're taking him out." Zephyr nodded grimly, her own mech Delta 6 priming its weapons. "We'll make him pay for what he's done to our people and to the galaxy." They split into teams, Johnny and Zephyr leading the charge into the heart of the facility, while the rest of the wolf pack focused on freeing the prisoners and planting explosives. As they fought their way deeper into the complex, they encountered increasingly horrific experiments, each more twisted than the last. Zion's creations attacked with reckless abandon, their minds shattered by the unholy fusion of flesh and technology. Johnny and Alpha One tore through them with ruthless efficiency, the mech's claws and fangs ripping through metal and bone alike. At last, they reached the central chamber, where Zion waited for them. The rogue general had undergone a monstrous transformation, his body a nightmarish fusion of Kobali flesh, Zorak's bioweapons, and cybernetic enhancements. His eyes glowed with an insane light, his voice a grating mechanical snarl. "Who you think you can stop me?" Zion bellowed, his arms morphing into pulsing biocannons. "I am the future of the galaxy. I am perfection incarnate." Johnny and Alpha One charged forward, their minds and bodies moving as one. They clashed with Zeon in a whirlwind of claws and energy blasts, the chamber shaking with the force of their battle. Zion was monstrously strong, his enhanced body shrugging off blows that would have felled a lesser being. But Johnny and Alpha One fought with the fury of the righteous, their bond unbreakable, their resolve unshakable. With a final desperate lunge, Johnny and Alpha One drove their claws into Zion's chest, tearing through his twisted heart. The rogue general let out a gurgling scream, his body convulsing as the life drained from him. As Zion collapsed, the facility began to shake itself apart, the destabilized bioweapons and overloading power cores threatening to reduce it to ash. Johnny and Zephyr rallied the wolf pack, ushering the freed prisoners towards the exit. They burst from the facility just as it exploded behind them, the shockwave slamming into their mechs and sending them tumbling. But they emerged intact, their armor scorched and battered, but their spirits unbroken. As the dust settled, the rescued Kobali citizens surrounded them, their faces alight with gratitude and awe. They cheered their saviors, the human and his metal wolf, the heroes who had risked everything to save them from a fate worse than death. Johnny looked to Zephyr, a weary smile on his face. They had won the battle, but he knew the war was far from over. There would be other threats, other challenges to face, but with Alpha One by his side and the wolf pack at his back, he felt ready to take on the galaxy. As the dust settled and the Kobali emerged from their shelters, blinking in the unfamiliar light of a new dawn, whispers began to spread. Whispers of the wolf pack, the human and his metal beasts who had saved them all. Johnny and his team were the heroes of the hour, their names spoken with reverence and awe. But even as the Kobali celebrated, the political landscape shifted beneath their feet. With Zion gone, factions within the government and military scrambled to fill the void, each seeking to advance their own agendas. Some saw the MX as a threat, a weapon too powerful to be left in the hands of outsiders. They called for the machines to be dismantled, their secrets studied and adapted for Kobali use. Others, however, recognized the potential of the human-mech bond. They sought to forge alliances with Johnny and his team, hoping to harness their strength for the good of the Kobali people. Zephyr found herself at the center of these debates, her expertise in alien technology, and her connection to Johnny making her a valuable asset to all sides. In the midst of this turmoil, a new threat emerged. The Zoracs, emboldened by the chaos, launched a fresh wave of attacks, this time targeting not just Kobali worlds, but human colonies as well. Reports flooded in of settlements burned to the ground, their inhabitants slaughtered or taken as slaves. Johnny was torn. He had sworn to protect the Kobali, to stand with them against any foe. But he was a human too, and the thought of his own kind suffering under Zorak's rule was more than he could bear. The decision weighed heavily upon him as he paced the halls of the Wolfpack's base, Alpha 1 by his side. The mech sensed his distress, a low rumble building in its chest. "Johnny," it said, its voice a mix of mechanical precision and something almost like concern, "what troubles you?" Johnny sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The Zoracs are attacking human colonies, Alpha. My people are dying out there, but we have a duty to the Kobali, to protect them from any threat. I don't know what to do." A chirp from his wrist console interrupted his thoughts. It was a distress call, a desperate plea for help from a besieged human outpost. Johnny recognized the codes, the familiar voice on the other end. It was his old unit, the men and women he had fought beside for so many years. In that moment he knew what he had to do. He gathered the Wolfpack, his eyes hard with resolve. "The Zoracs are hitting human colonies now," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "I can't ask any of you to leave the Kobali undefended, but I have to go. I have to help my people." To his surprise, several of the Kobali soldiers stepped forward, their faces set with determination. "We'll come with you," one said, his scales rippling with emotion. "The Kobali owe you a debt we can never repay. If your people are in danger, we'll stand with you." He turned to the rest of the Wolfpack, his gaze lingering on Zephyr. "I'm leaving you in command," he told her, his voice steady. "Keep our people safe. Hold the line." Zephyr stepped forward, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Come back to us," she whispered, her voice fierce. "Don't you dare die out there, Johnny Tucker." Johnny smiled, a quick flash of teeth. "I'll do my best," he promised. And then he was gone, Alpha 1 and half the Wolfpack at his side, racing towards an uncertain future and a battle they could not afford to lose. The journey to the besieged outpost was harrowing. A gauntlet of Zorak ships and treacherous asteroid fields. Johnny and his team fought their way through, their mechs a blur of claws and cannon fire. They arrived to find the outpost in ruins, its defenses shattered, and its people cowering in hidden bunkers. But the Wolfpack did not falter. They descended on the Zoracs like avenging angels, tearing through their ranks with a fury that seemed almost inhuman. Alpha 1 was a force of nature, its jaws ripping through armor and bone, its claws leaving trails of shattered metal in its wake. Johnny fought like a man possessed, his mind melded seamlessly with his mechs, his reflexes and instincts superhuman. He could feel the terror of the outpost's survivors, their desperate hope as they watched the mechs turn the tide of battle. But even as they drove the Zoracs back, a new threat emerged. A group of human soldiers, their uniforms marked with an unfamiliar insignia, opened fire on the mechs, their weapons leaving scars of melted metal on the machine's armored hides. Johnny felt a surge of rage, tempered by a profound sadness. These were his people, his fellow humans. But they saw him as something else now, something to be feared and destroyed. He knew he could not blame them, not really. The Meeks were a new and terrifying thing, a blurring of the lines between man and machine. But he also knew he could not let their fear and prejudice stop him from doing what was right. He set his jaw and charged forward, Alpha 1 at his side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle was far from over, but he would not rest until his people, both human and Kobali Osmani, were safe. But even as Johnny and his team fought to protect the innocent, a new threat was brewing on the horizon. The Zoracs, in a final desperate gambit, unleashed a massive planet-killing weapon aimed at the heart of Kobali space. The news spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves of fear and panic throughout the galaxy. Johnny and Alpha 1 exchanged a grim look as the distress calls flooded in. They knew what they had to do. Gathering the wolf pack, they raced towards the coordinates of the weapon, their mechs pushing their engines to the limit. As they approached the weapon's location, they found themselves fighting through a gauntlet of enemy forces. Zorak's ships swarmed around them, their weapons blazing, while ground troops and fortifications stood between them and the control center. At last they reached the control center, blasting their way inside. But what they found there stopped them in their tracks. The weapon, they realized, was not Zorak's at all. It was a remnant of an ancient human civilization, one that had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. The weapon's AI, a cold and calculating entity, regarded them with something akin to amusement. It had been manipulating both the Zoraks and the Kobali for centuries, pitting them against each other in a never-ending cycle of war and destruction. And now, it saw the mechs as the perfect tools to reclaim its lost empire. With the mechs under its control, it could conquer the galaxy anew, wiping out any species that dared to stand in its way. Johnny and Alpha One were faced with a terrible choice. They could destroy the weapon and the AI, sacrificing their own lives in the process, or they could allow it to wipe out the Kobali, paving the way for a new human dominion over the stars. For a long moment Johnny hesitated, torn between his loyalty to his own kind and his bond with the Kobali. But as he looked into Alpha One's eyes, he saw a reflection of his own soul. The mech was more than just a machine. It was a partner, a friend, a part of himself. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. He and Alpha One were one, their destinies intertwined. They would sacrifice themselves to save the Kobali, to preserve the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve. Together, they plunged their merged form into the heart of the weapon. Tearing through its inner workings with a fierce determination, the AI screamed in rage and defiance, but it was too late. The explosion was cataclysmic, a blinding flash of light that consumed everything in its path. Across a dozen star systems, the sky lit up with the fury of 1,000 suns, a testament to the sacrifice of two heroes. In the aftermath, the Kobali and the humans came together to mourn their fallen saviors. Zephyr, her heart heavy with grief, took up the mantle of leadership, working tirelessly to build bridges between the two species. The mechs became a symbol of unity and cooperation, with Kobali and human pilots working side by side to protect their shared interests. The legacy of Johnny and Alpha One lived on, inspiring a new generation of heroes to take up the fight. But even as peace settled across the galaxy, there were whispers of new threats lurking in the shadows, rumors of other ancient weapons waiting to be discovered by those foolish or desperate enough to seek them out. And in the depths of space, a new enemy stirred, drawn by the echoes of the cataclysm, an enemy older and more powerful than any the galaxy had ever faced, with designs on the very fabric of reality itself. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.